Welcome back to Can You Believe That? And what we're going to talk about today, you're going to actually be asking yourself, can you really believe that? We're going to be talking about cryptids today, something I've actually never even heard of. I've heard of some of the animals or creatures we're going to talk about today, but I've never heard of them referred to as cryptids. Where does that come from, Tommy?
Well, this is awesome. So I love that you aren't super familiar, but I guarantee, much like you, everybody out there is familiar with at least one or two cryptid animals. It comes from a term called cryptozoology, meaning hidden animals. And
Okay.
the whole point of it is there's things out there that previously existed and we thought were extinct, but they're not, especially things like dinosaurs. There's things out there that we just haven't been able to scientifically categorize. And some people will put mythological and paranormal creatures into the mix, but the cryptozoologists who do this as a scientific study, they really poo-poo on that. So give or take, some things may or may not fit the bill, and we can talk about that too.
For those of you who are following along, I'm the Car Wizard at my own channel, Car Wizard, over 1 million subscribers. And also we have a paranormal guru with us, Thomas Durant.
Yeah, paranormal guy, producer of television, and have 0 subscribers unless you sub right now. And if you sub right now, then I might have a subscriber. But this is awesome. So happy to be doing this with you, Wizard. And it's just fun that we get to share a love of something other than cars.
Definitely. So you're talking about cryptids and you mentioned dinosaurs. I don't think there's too many people out there that can deny that they existed. You can go in some of the desert Southwest or Utah places and you can go see with your own eyes fossils. They're there. They were there at some time.
Yeah, and it's possible, though highly unlikely, but possible that some of these creatures may have survived over millions of years and still just continued about their business in small population sizes. And that would lead us to what people today might consider to be a cryptid animal. Now, they're not all dinosaurs or prehistoric animals, but there's enough evidence that there might be something to this.
You know, I talk to friends and family within Christian groups and things, and anything that's unexplained, whether it could be aliens or Bigfoot or any of those kinds of weird things, they automatically refer to as some kind of demonic entity that's portraying itself as this or as that, just to confuse you or get you off track and to disturb your Christian walk in life. Even being a Christian, I disagree. We can see that dinosaurs have existed. And like you mentioned, some of these things, crocodiles are still alive today. And they were alive all the way back then. Sharks, they've been around for millions of years. But what are some of the famous cryptids, some of the things that really stick out as people have heard on TV?
Well, the biggest ones, since we're talking about dinosaurs, two of my favorites. You have the Loch Ness Monster, which many people believe to be a plesiosaur. And then the same goes for the United States. Yes, here in the US, we have our own Loch Ness Monster called Champ. And Champ exists in Lake Champlain between New York and Vermont. I actually went there as a kid. It was the only trip I ever wanted to take with my family. I forced my mom to bring me to Lake Champlain to look for Champ. Surprise, didn't see anything.
No.
But I think the biggest one that everybody knows about, and we'll do a whole episode on this, but obviously Bigfoot. Even Kansas has a Bigfoot.
And I've one thing, thinking about Bigfoot, since we're on that topic, there's many people in different states in America that would have a different name for it. There would be like Darren, Yeti, Sasquatch, Skunk Ape.
There's no way that many people seeing the same type of phenomenon in different places aren't seeing something strange.
I agree, because you can go to cave paintings that are thousands of years old, and there are stories on the walls of some kind of creatures or things that they've seen, and we're still talking about it today. There must be something to it.
Yeah, and to give a modern example too, like not too long ago, Tasmanian tigers were around and had their ranges that they lived in. Then we thought they went extinct. Well, now there's people that are getting photographs and video of what they believe to be Tasmanian tigers alive and in the wild. So
Hmm.
the populations could be small, but these creatures could very well still exist.
There could be families of these creatures. In order for one to survive, there had to have been two, a mother and a father, going back 65 million years. How could these things be alive today and no one's ever really, I mean, there's no one captured one or has a stuffed one or something like that, taxidermy or
Well, when you get down to the nitty gritty of most of these things, you're talking about small populations that are able to breed and to stay around. And I always like to equate it as we know that there's grizzly bears here in Washington state. Not many, but every so often you get a report where someone says, "Oh, I've seen one." Now, it's not the same grizzly bear over 100 years that somebody's been seeing. And we think with Sasquatch, that's the same thing. We think that these are small breeding populations that live in isolated pockets. Yeah, we don't find any bodies, but truthfully, like in the woods, things eat it. They decompose over time, and you'd have to be looking for it and knowing what you're looking for, really.
right.
So, with like the vast expanses where Bigfoot are said to roam, the number of people in those spots is pretty slim. So who's going to find the remains? And who knows? Maybe they have rituals to bury the remains.
That could be. I actually just saw on the news where Asian elephants have been found to bury their young if they die. If an elephant can do that, why couldn't a Yeti or a Bigfoot? Maybe it's being buried, or that if such a small family, like you're mentioning, there's not 5,000 of them.
Well, right. And so, like with Mexican gray wolves and red wolves back in the East Coast, just to give you a living example, these are animals that have breeding populations of hundreds. So the chances of you seeing a red wolf in the wild is incredibly rare, right? But if
Hmm.
they're still there, we still know they're there because we've tagged them, we've created breeding programs. We just don't have breeding programs for some of these other creatures like the chupacabra or the Bigfoot or pterosaurs, which in Kansas, that's one of the big things that people have reported is some sort of dinosaur-like flying creature. But then you've got these other elements that come in with some, but not all cryptids. And this is the cool part. You've got things like people following footprints from Bigfoot and then they just disappear.
Right.
And that's led some people to ponder if these creatures are fully physical at all, or if there is some sort of paranormal side to their existence. But that's a whole nother can of worms.
That would be a whole other can of worms. And if that were the case, that would definitely tie into some of the religious or the Christian beliefs that these are possibly demons. But thinking about the chupacabra, you just mentioned that. What exactly is a chupacabra? I've heard of it, something about a goat sucker or something, but what does it even look like?
The goat sucker. Well, it's funny because reports vary, right? So some people claim to see something that looks almost dog like with no hair, which a lot of people think, oh, it's just a street dog with mange that they've seen. But other people would say that it was more cat like or had wings or had hooves for feet. And that's the weird part about these. Like some creatures, it's verbatim every single time, and
Hmm.
others, like the Jersey Devil, which may or may not be paranormal, or chupacabra varies a little bit with the sightings. So it's hard to say. The reports are so wide with some of these creatures. You know, it's not like the
Hmm.
Mongolian death worm, which is another cryptid creature, which is supposedly this giant worm that will swallow you whole from under the ground. I mean, just like straight up out of Star Wars. What is it, Returning the Jedi, where they
Hmm.
drop into that pit? Bigfoot, aside from a couple features, it's almost consistent every single time. The Rougarou or dogmen, which are like some of my favorite cases. Rougarou is a creature in Louisiana, in the bayous of
Right.
Louisiana, that is supposedly almost werewolf-like in a way and has a sort of paranormal aspect to it. But dogmen are just giant wolves that happen to walk on 2 feet. So
Mm.
people are always terrified by those. And I can understand if I saw a giant wolf, crazy. But there's also paranormal aspects to them, whereas people who have seen dire wolves or what they call giant wolves in the wild, well, a dire wolf existed and it was real and they were massive.
I have friends, and also one of my employees is from the Hispanic culture, not just Mexico, but also from Puerto Rico and Spain. And they have a lot of creatures they talk about. There's one called El Cuco
Oh, wow.
or El Cucoy. It's kind of like a Bigfoot or a dog man or something like that in their culture. And in the Thunderbird, is it
Yeah.
a pterosaur? Is it a bird? I guess that's yet to be seen, but
Yeah. And in Kansas, you had another one called Sinkhole Sam, and they believe that it's a giant snake or serpent of sorts. Is that something that existed before? Maybe, or is it just a genetic mutation and a snake got just really big? Hard to say. But because of the limited amount of sightings in the time period that people talk about, it's possible it was just a genetic anomaly. But there's just a lot that we don't know about it. And I guess it's nice that people aren't just making stuff up, but it's also kind of curious why there's not more people looking into it.
believe it or not, the Bible actually talks about some creatures. There, I guess you could consider them cryptids. But in the book of Job, it talks about the behemoth, which is some kind of a large creature that it says it eats grass. Its bones are like iron, and it has a tail that's something it says is stiff like wood or something. I'm not really understanding that, but it definitely talks about a very large creature. It doesn't describe it very well. I mean, what's going on with that? What is that?
Yeah, I wonder if that could be like, say, something like an ankylosaur, a giant armored herbivore dinosaur that's got this giant armor plating on the back. But doesn't the Bible also talk about dragons and serpents?
Yeah, it talks about serpents, dragons. One of the famous, and there's actually had movies named after this, is called Leviathan, a creature that lives in the sea, and it's in the book of Job, Psalms, Isaiah. It keeps bringing that up as if this is a real creature. So if they're talking about Behemoth and Leviathan as these cryptid type creatures that truly existed, then I guess it would be hard to say, well, Bigfoot doesn't exist or it's not in the Bible. So based on that, I would find it hard to say these other creatures can't exist. I have to believe that they possibly can.
Exactly. I mean, the world is a big place. We barely know anything about our oceans. We barely know anything about space. And I'm sure that we barely know anything about the animals that exist in the remotes of this planet. And that's the thing. There's people discovering new species every day. Who's to say that some big honking thing that looks like me and you, but just has bigger feet, isn't out there roaming the woods of Washington State, roaming Alaska, roaming the wilds of Maine, which is one of the most forested states in the country. So
Mm-hmm.
there's places for these animals to exist, and even the deserts. Not, I mean, if you drive across the Southwest, there's houses, sure, right on the freeway, but if you go out into the desert, it's a lot of empty space.
It is.
And you would think it's all dead because it's the desert. But when you look really closely at it, there's a lot of life out there. So could
There is.
something be existing out there like a chupacabra? Could it just be surviving off of drinking the blood of animals as a source of water? It's possible.
One thing that you could consider a cryptid because it had been declared extinct was the fish called the coelacanth.
Yes.
People say, I think I've seen one of these fish, and scientists are like, bull crap. Those don't exist. They're extinct. You didn't see that. You saw something else. Then they actually found them, and they're still alive today. Even science acknowledges they actually still exist.
And that's the thing. If there is going to be some sort of scientific revelation to help put some fodder behind the cryptid idea, unfortunately, it's probably going to be somebody finding the body of Loch Ness Monster. I mean, oh, I'd be so sad if Nessie died because I love Nessie, my favorite. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. So more people, like our viewers out here, need to get up out of their chairs. Not please watch the video first though. Like finish
Yes.
watching this because it helps us. But then after you do that and you comment below or you ask us questions and you like the video, then go outside and go find your wilderness, go find the wilds of where you live and just look for something strange, look for tracks that you don't know. Be safe though. Obviously there's wild animals out there and wild people, maybe wilder people, but get out there and do something and maybe you'll be the person who makes the contribution that tells everyone, hey, yeah, chupacabra is real, or hey, the Loch Ness monster's here and I found a body, and science, come to your science things.
And if you guys do come across a wild man, please don't confuse him with the car wizard or Thomas Durant.
I know.
It's not us out there.
This is not me trying to look like Bigfoot. It's just unfortunately my natural appearance when I don't get a nice shave. Well, Wizard, we do have some questions from our audience for this episode. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Wizard, here we go. Gary Patterson 65 asks you, do you know what cryptid creatures are out there in Kansas besides the three that we talked about?
The only ones I've ever heard of is the Sasquatch or Bigfoot and also the Chupacabra. Some of the ones you mentioned earlier, I actually have not heard of those before. What was it? The
Sinkhole Sam is my favorite from Kansas.
Sinkhole Sam, yeah, I'd never heard of that, but I've definitely heard of Sasquatch and also Chupacabra. That's really all I've ever heard of growing up. I've been here since I was 10 years old.
You've been in Kansas since you were 10?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm surprised you've stayed there that long. No offense, Kansans out there. I mean,
I'm planning on leaving sometime soon, though, in the future. Yes.
And it's because of the heat and the tornadoes, not the people.
In Sinkhole Sam, I'm scared of that.
Yeah. Next question is for me, and it's from Too Creepy for Chrissy, which is a fun name. In your years as an investigator, have you ever come across a cryptid? I will say this, not as an investigator. I did have an incident in Florida, of all places, where everything goes weird. I was on a trip to Florida looking at colleges with a friend of mine, and his dad was driving us, and it was the middle of the night. We're on one of the straight, long, narrow interstates through the bayou, and something crossed in front of us. All I can say that I saw and that my friend's dad saw was something on four legs, moved really fast, was sizable, bigger than people, long, kind of reddish blonde hair.
Wow.
We saw that. My friend's dad drove for another few miles to make sure we weren't near it. He pulled over and then he got out and started pouring ice on his head because he thought he was hallucinating.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to get that out of my mind. So it's like, what was that? I mean, could it have been a skunk ape? Yeah, I mean, that's the area where it would have existed. Could it also have somehow been maybe like a brown bear? I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like those are common to Florida, especially the swamps of Florida. But anything's possible. Maybe something escaped from a zoo and I just happened to be there to see it.
Very good.
Last question we have from Jen Healing Hands asking you, Wizard.
Okay.
Is there biblical precedent for these cryptid creatures, and are they considered demonic or part of God's domain?
Well, just like I mentioned, a couple of creatures, Leviathan and Behemoth, it does mention some unexplained, strange creatures that supposedly actually exist. There would be certain sects or factions or different things of the Christian religion that they would say, you didn't see Bigfoot, you saw a demon. But then there will be others, good church-going people, that say, hey, I've seen Bigfoot when I was out hunting. I came across it. So based on that, yeah, there are creatures in the Bible. Whether or not they're demonic, it really depends on who you talk to. There's different varying ideas of the whole cryptid situation.
Well, I appreciate that you're open to it, though, because that's the thing, right? Like, we're coming from very different places, but we're having an open and honest discussion about these strange phenomenon. But I love that, going back to what we said last episode, there's this ability to have a discourse, to ask the questions and to not just be offended, to not just be upset, to not just dig your heels in the sand. It's all about listening to each other and about trying to come to a conclusion together.
And you never know that the combination of both of the things we've experienced or know could actually in the future come to a conclusion, actually find the answer to this or that. So it's good to have an open mind and open ears to hear all the different sides of the story, not just both sides of the story. There's multiple sides.
Yeah. And we encourage all of you out there to feel free in our comments section. You open up a dialogue, open up a discussion, because this is part of the ongoing idea of trying to understand what our world's really about. So what's our next episode, Wizard?
Our next episode is actually something I've actually seen, and we're going to be talking about UFOs.
Oh, this is exciting. Yes. We're just getting started, folks.
One thing that we would like you to do before you click the stop button or move on to something else is hit the subscribe button for Can You Believe That? We have so many more cool videos coming down the line. We're going to be talking about all the different topics. And again, like Tommy said, without digging in our heels or being offensive. So definitely hit the subscribe button, and thanks for watching today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. I don't know why I did this. That was weird.